This episode was sponsored by Critical Dice and the Endless Bag of Dice.
Welcome to the CompenDM, a resource designed to help you spend less time learning D&D and more time actually playing. But as you mentioned, usually, and this was actually kind of another question on here, is like how often should you have combat encounters during, a session or something like that? Usually you should have 2 or 3 combat scenarios in between long rests. And so by the time that you're getting towards those last ones, I mean, again, depending on your homebrew story, there's lots of variables here. This is just very like a cookie cutter concept here. Yeah. But by that last one, your party should be low on spell slots. They should be low on hit dice. There should be some areas where they're now going to have to start thinking more strategically, because they're kind of getting to the point that if they get hit too much, they could actually, like, their character could die. And so you could structure it where, maybe the first 2 encounters of the night or of the, D&D 24-hour day aren't that challenging. They're just fun. You just throw some stuff at them to get the, the players warmed up. But then as you go on, the last 1 or 2 before the long rest, that's where you start to kind of throw in some strategic maneuvers or some other things. And so it's not necessarily just about combat. You have to think before and after about where they're going to be, their character is going to be at kind of in this situation.
Yeah, exactly. And so often people don't build their kind of narrative arcs with a lot of obstacles. I don't want to say like combats, but just obstacles. That could be traps, that could be social interactions, that can be combat. And they're like, wow, like this is just really underpowered. And you're like, yeah, but there's supposed to be 4 of those before they got to the long rest. And they're like, oh, I did 2. No wonder. So if you know you're only going to do 2, crank that thing up, man. Right. And then also take that into account that if you want to have, if they're fighting, like if they've had like 4 encounters with kind of really easy combatants, like, goblins or something, that means that they've been slowly worn down a little bit, but not pronouncedly, and they're feeling pretty good about themselves. And then the BBEG is just a demi-lich, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm in danger now. Yeah. So you can crank that and kind of balance shift that for dramatic effect too, which is really a lot of fun, where they're like, all right, this is easy. And then you're like, well, I have all these other, challenge rating points left over for the final battle. I'm going to put them all in one big thing, so there's a lot of ways to do that, but yeah.
Right. One person who's really good at making combat exciting is Chris Solo. With the he really does a good job. I always enjoyed his combat setups.
Yeah, I think
that's actually a good point too, is watch other people, like go online and watch D&D games or listen to D&D podcasts where people are playing and just see what they do and how it works out, and then just kind of absorb that knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
There are other DMs out there than Matt Mercer, and he is a fantastic specimen, but I will say there are the way that he facilitates combat is very descriptive and intense. However, I will say there's a lot of other DMs out there that I will say are better at the whole combat, keeping it interesting, keeping it challenging. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you guys so much for joining us this week on the CompenDM, where we are talking about all things D&D, helping you spend less time learning and more time actually playing. This episode was sponsored by the Critical Dice and the Endless Bag of Dice, where you can get a new set of dice delivered to your door every single month for as little as $6.99. Click on the link in the show notes to learn more. Make sure you subscribe to our channel if you enjoyed listening in this week, so that you know every time we push out a new video. And also leave a comment below if you learned something new in this episode that you didn't know before. Thank you so much for listening in. We'll see you guys next time.